When her AirPods automatically paired with my iPad, I didn't hear music. I heard her voice. And a man's voice too. I was sitting at my desk in my home office, buried in a quarterly sales report, when the little FaceTime icon flashed in the corner of my screen. At first, I didn't even realize it was an active call. Usually we answer FaceTimes together, giggling over filters, but this one hadn't been properly hung up. My AirPods immediately switched over to the iPad. They'd been synced to the same family Apple ID as her iPhone ages ago. I froze. Screenshots were already on my desktop, so I instinctively tapped the screenshot button. Up in the corner was a single-letter contact, T. Her face in a dimly lit room, a man's muffled laughter, the soft words, "It's so hard to wait for you to get back alone tonight." My heart seized. Her work party with colleagues was supposed to be a fun night out, new people, a catered spread, dancing to the DJ's beats. But instead, I'd caught an intimate fragment of her conversation. In the eerie silence of my living room, the AirPods mic picked up every little whisper of her breathing. No office noise, no background chatter, just the two of them in what sounded like a hotel room. My pulse hammered in my ears, but I stayed calm. I snapped another screenshot showing the exact timestamp on the call, cleared the notifications, and dove into the list of recent iCloud backups. In seconds, I'd unearthed the messages she thought she'd deleted. There were photos of her early semesters at university, biology lab coats, textbooks scattered on tables, with captions like, "T always had my back," and "T told me I was the smartest person in the room." According to the dates, it had been going on for 4 months, starting the week I flew to Chicago on business. At first, the texts were innocent. "How was your day? You look beautiful in that white blouse." Then they turned more intense. "I miss you more than I ever thought possible." Every time I'd asked what was going on, she'd brushed me off, said it was just old friends reminiscing. I believed her. Now the proof was staring me in the face. Thousands of words, hundreds of photos, each new message a knife twisting in my chest. I glanced at the front door. She'd left without me, leaving me surrounded by digital evidence like an interrogation room. My mind spun. Who was this guy? I quickly looked up T in her contacts. Tyler Miller, her former professor from that third-semester plant morphology class. Never thought a college teacher could get so personal. Tears stung my eyes, but I couldn't stop scrolling. There they were, pictures of them together at the student mixer, coffee shop dates out by campus, even a summer seminar when I was convinced she was working late. I wanted to call her right then and demand answers, but I knew an angry phone call would just sound like a meltdown. I needed to be quiet, methodical. I opened the Find My app. Her phone was still offline. Her colleagues were supposed to be back by midnight, but what if they weren't coming home at all? I slipped the iPad into my backpack, grabbed my keys, and headed out into the moonless spring night. First stop, that hip downtown loft where the company party was happening. As I pulled up, muffled music thumped behind tinted windows. A handful of cars in the lot, HR SUVs, the accounting team's sedans. No sign of Emily. I circled the building, eavesdropped on passing groups, but nobody had seen her since 9. My confusion turned to rage. She wasn't there. Did she forget her AirPods at home? No, she'd been wearing them when I intercepted the call. Back to Find My, and finally a dot. A small roadside hotel 20 miles out on the highway, the exact spot where the conversation had been held. My blood froze. Then I slammed the car into gear and headed south, leaving the city lights and my old life behind. When I arrived at Silver Pines Motel, its low brick facade glowed under a few sickly overhead lamps. In the nearly empty lot, I spotted Tyler's black sedan, misty windows and a dinged bumper, and next to it, her silver Honda Civic with the Emily's Biology Lab sticker on the back window. My pulse raced. My throat went dry. I shut off the engine but left it running, steeling myself for what came next. I climbed out, my backpack heavy with the iPad inside, pressed for a second against the cold hood to catch my breath, then crept to the glass entrance. No sounds, no laughter, no luggage wheels, just a faint echo from upstairs. I nudged the door with my shoulder. It creaked open. Inside, the lobby was half-lit, empty chairs and a vacant 24-hour reception desk. I headed up the staircase, avoiding the elevator so I wouldn't draw attention. Room 212's numbers blinked overhead. I pressed my ear to the door. "Are you happy?" he whispered, she answered, voice trembling. Yes, I never thought we could meet like this again. I missed you, he rasped. Every night I dreamed of this moment. My hand hovered over the screenshot button. Through the crack in the door, I saw her profile under a low lamp. Eyes closed, brows drawn together in shame and anticipation. Tyler's hand rested on her shoulder. I grabbed my shot. I hesitated. Burst in, make a scene, or hit them hard with the cold truth from my backpack. But if they saw me, all would shatter. I slipped back into the hallway, careful not to reveal my room number, and reopened the iPad to the message thread. New texts lit up the screen. I got that bottle of wine we shared at graduation. I still love how you take your morning coffee. I've been waiting for you to say yes. Then last night's, I love you, my little scientist. My chest tightened. 400 messages, 400 betrayals. Deciding I had enough proof, I zipped the iPad away and headed for the elevator, but just then the door across from me opened, and she stepped out. Evening clutch, makeup bag, and an almost empty office retreat, backpack in hand. Our eyes locked, her face registering shock, fear, and sudden guilt. I didn't say a word. I just brought out the iPad, opened to the T contact and the messages. Explain this, I said, my voice quivering with hurt, not anger. Who is T, and why does he know you better than I do? She choked back a sob, tears spilling down her cheeks. When she finally spoke, her words were a dagger to my heart. I don't know how to explain. I never meant to. I thought we were just friends. I didn't want to lie to you. Friends don't do this, I whispered. There are 400 screenshots, Emily. This isn't casual chatting, it's an entire hidden life. Her bags dropped to the carpet with a clatter. I turned away, stared at her Civic in the parking lot, the empty seats, the firestorm between us, but I knew then that tomorrow there was no going back. I walked toward the elevator, leaving her sobs and empty promises behind. The only sound was my footsteps echoing down the hall. I didn't notice how long I stood in the elevator before it dinged at my floor. The lobby was silent now, but the echo of her cries felt like it was still clinging to the walls. I made for my car, the backpack of evidence a lead weight on my shoulder. What would happen to her in that cold motel room all alone? I wasn't furious anymore, just hollow, like a squeezed-out lemon with nothing left inside. In the driver's seat, I stared at her Civic and Tyler's sedan in the rearview mirror. I opened the iPad one last time, skimmed the worst photos and messages, then locked it and let out a long breath. 4 months of secrets had been enough to shatter 5 years of marriage. On autopilot, I dialed her number. No answer. My text sat unread. In her chat app, I saw online, another punch to the gut. I closed the iPad, started the engine, and drove back toward the city on unlit country roads. Home was quiet. I dropped my keys, ignored the hallway, and collapsed at my desk. The night sky reflected in the window was as dark as the secret I'd uncovered. I drank water, my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. A shower felt impossible, as if washing off the day would also wash away the proof. Instead, I moved to the kitchen where we used to cook together. Baguette slices, fresh veggies, glasses of wine lined up. Now only crumbs remained. I folded the screenshots into a folder labeled Emily, dated it, and uploaded it to the cloud, where she still thought she controlled her story. The next morning at the office, Excel spreadsheets looked alien. Coworkers brought me coffee, cracked jokes in the hallway, but all I heard was her voice and his whisper. By noon, I told my boss I was taking leave. I needed space to figure out who I was without her. Back in my empty apartment, her shoes still by the door, her coat on a hanger, I felt something unexpected. Calm. I opened a window, the spring breeze and faint scent of blossoms swept through, clearing the last traces of us. I boxed up her coat, her shoes, the makeup bag. Didn't do it to punish, but to close this chapter. On the box I wrote, Emily, pick up by May 7. My phone buzzed again, her name on the screen. I declined. Unread text, please open the door. I want to explain. Don't leave. Her trembling voicemail. I didn't listen. I flipped open a notebook, dated the page, and wrote one word, end. Then shut it. Over the following days I walked along the riverbank, each step washing me free from the wreckage of betrayal. Her voice still lingered in my mind, but I knew it was time to write a new story. One morning I saw her across the park by the fountain, spring jacket, hair tied back. She never looked up, and I didn't approach. I just turned away and kept running, letting the crisp air push the past from my lungs. By the second week, something inside me shifted. Trust returned, or maybe I discovered a new kind of strength in knowing I wasn't alone. I canceled my leave and went back to my regular routine, leaving work at work so I wouldn't bring her memory home. That afternoon, I met Sam and his friend Laura for an impromptu riverside picnic. Strawberries, books, movies, laughter. It hit me. Healing isn't running from problems, it's allowing yourself to simply live. One evening, my phone pinged. "Can we talk?" Her message floated on the screen like an echo from that first FaceTime. I closed the app, set the phone on silence. 5 minutes later, I texted back, "Yeah, we can talk." But this time on my terms. I sat upright in my chair, steady breath, ready to hear her out, free from old illusions and hopes. That conversation was different. No accusations, just facts and honesty. I didn't lay down conditions, I listened. Because healing comes not from apologies whispered into silence, but from actions that follow. And maybe beyond this line of pain, we could find something new. Respect. Boundaries. The understanding that love evolves when you choose truth over comfort. When she left that night, I stood alone in the living room. The emptiness felt new, like a blank page waiting for fresh words. I glanced at the box of her things and realized I no longer needed it. We'd both drawn new lines in the sand and left the past where it belonged. Out on my balcony, the night air wrapped around me like an old friend. City lights flickered below, stars stretched overhead, reminding me that after the longest night, dawn always comes. And I was ready to meet it. Not as the man lost in lies, but as the man who knows the value of trust and the strength of honesty. The city's skyline lay before me like a promised horizon, and I realized I'd spent so long looking backward that I'd forgotten how to look forward. In the weeks that followed our first real conversation, I stuck to the routines I'd rediscovered: morning runs, boxing sessions, art classes, and let those small victories build a new sense of self. Each time I laced up my sneakers at dawn, I felt my lungs fill not with guilt or regret, but with possibility. One Saturday morning, I found myself at the community center again, signing up for a pottery class. I'd never worked with clay before, but something about the hands-on, messy process felt right. Centering a wobbling lump on the wheel and coaxing it into shape reminded me that nothing perfect is made in a moment, that real forms emerge out of friction and persistence. My first bowl wobbled one way, then the other, until the instructor guided my thumbs just so, and suddenly it was round. I looked at that bowl, imperfections and all, and smiled, tracing its rim with my finger. It was a small metaphor, but one I desperately needed. That afternoon, I met Sam and Laura at the bookstore cafe, our new ritual. We sipped black coffee from heavy mugs and compared lists of favorite authors. Laura pressed a book of poems into my hand, saying, "These helped me through my divorce." I flipped it open to a line about breaking open and finding light inside the fracture. The words made my throat tighten, but not in pain, more in recognition. I bought the book, tucked it into my backpack, and carried it with me everywhere. Work slowly crept back into focus too. I returned from leave to find that projects had moved forward without me, and while I felt a twinge of anxiety, I also felt pride. I belonged here, and my absence hadn't broken everything. I started bringing a lunch to the office, a simple salad or leftover stir-fry, and ate at my desk without feeling the need to call her or check messages. My phone sat silent in my pocket, and for once, that was a good thing. One evening, as summer's first heat wave rolled in, I went to the riverfront park alone. Kids chased kites beneath a pink sunset, and joggers drifted by like friendly ghosts. I found the old wooden bench where I'd first sat after packing up her things. I opened my notebook and wrote at length what I'd learned, how I'd changed, what I still wanted. At the bottom of the page, I penned a letter to Emily, not to send, but to close the loop. "Thank you for teaching me the depths of my own courage. I hope you find your way too." I folded the page and tucked it inside the journal's back cover. Late that summer, I took a long weekend trip to the mountains. I hadn't planned it, just booked a small cabin near a hiking trail when I saw a deal online. No Wi-Fi, no cell service, just the wind through pine boughs and my own thoughts. On the first hike, I scrambled over rock ledges, listening to my heartbeat sync with the forest. At the peak, I watched clouds drift across a sea of ridges, and I felt something lift inside me. a lightness I hadn't known since college, before life got complicated. Back home, I framed two things on my apartment wall: that imperfect pottery bowl and a small canvas of mine, all blues and oranges tangled together. Every morning, I passed them on my way to the coffee maker, and they reminded me that I was more than my regrets, that I could shape a life out of chaos. Autumn arrived, and with it an invitation. Sam's cousin was hosting a small fall festival in his backyard. I hesitated for a moment. Fall festivals always meant couples, families, tailgate football. But then I said yes. I grabbed my leather jacket, folded Emily's letter into my wallet, and joined the crowd. There were pumpkin carvings, apple cider on tap, and a fire pit where people roasted marshmallows. I found myself laughing easily at Sam's jokes, clinking my cup with Laura, trading stories with strangers who didn't know my history. On the drive home that night, the crisp air through the open window carried the scent of wood smoke and possibilities. I thought about calling Emily, to tell her I'd forgiven her, to thank her for the lesson. But then I realized I didn't need another conversation to complete my story. I'd already written the last page, and it was time to close the book. That night, I placed Emily's letter in a small wooden box on my bookshelf and slid it between two art supplies, a reminder that some chapters belong in the past. I leaned back in my chair, looked out at the city lights, and felt a warmth in my chest. Not love, not sorrow, but resolution. I knew tomorrow I'd lace up my sneakers again, and the day after that I'd center another lump of clay. Step by step, imperfect but authentic, I was building something entirely my own. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where it led. That fall night, as I crawled into bed and pulled the covers up around my shoulders, I felt something settle inside me. Like a storm finally spent. For the first time in months, I didn't replay her voicemail or scroll through old messages. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, letting the quiet fill the spaces I'd once tried to flee. Over the next few weeks, my days fell into a rhythm I'd long forgotten. Mornings still belonged to my runs, though now I mixed in hill sprints to push my limits. The pottery wheel called me twice a week. By now my throwing had improved beyond that lopsided first bowl, and I took pride in the functional mugs and simple vases lining my shelf. Art therapy sessions yielded fewer anguished splashes of paint and more deliberate strokes, each canvas a map of where I'd been and where I was headed. I slipped back into the office with a steadier stride. My boss smiled when I dropped by her desk, reporting that my projects were back on track. Even my teammates noticed I'd come back different, more focused, less skittish when someone popped into my workspace unannounced. When they asked how my leave was, I simply said that I'd taken time to reset and that I was ready. One late afternoon, as I was locking up, my phone buzzed with a text I didn't expect. "Hey, saw your bowl at the holiday craft fair. It was beautiful. Want to grab coffee?" It was Maya, the instructor for my pottery class. I smiled at the screen, realizing that I'd long since moved past any fear of new beginnings. "Sure," I typed back, my heart fluttering in a way I hadn't felt since before all of it. That weekend, we met at the little cafe on Maple Street. She wore a gray sweater flecked with bits of clay dust, and her laugh felt like sunshine through windows. We talked about glazes and wheel speed, then drifted into favorite road trips and dogs we'd grown up with. I noticed how easy it was to share, a conversation built on subtle chemistry rather than guilt or obligation. When we parted, she hugged me tightly, promising to text me about a new wheel lamp she'd found. As I walked to my car, I caught myself grinning, surprised by how right it felt. December arrived with frost on the windows and strings of lights in every storefront. I wrapped Emily's letter, still tucked in that wooden box, inside a card that read simply, "For closure." I left it on my bookshelf next to a photo of my first kiln firing and a small stack of my favorite sketchbooks. I'd allowed that box to hold my gratitude and my goodbye. Now it could rest. On Christmas Eve, I hosted a small dinner for Sam, Laura, and Maya on short notice. My apartment, warmed by holiday candles, smelled of roasted vegetables and fresh bread. We laughed over board games, toasted with spiced cider, and traded stories about awkward family gatherings. At one point, I paused in the kitchen doorframe and watched them, real friends, real laughter, and felt my chest expand with contentment. Later that night, When the last guest was gone and the city outside was muffled by falling snow, I stood at my window and gazed at the quiet street below. My phone lay beside me, silent save for a single unopened message. "Merry Christmas." From Maya. I walked to my desk, tapped it open and typed, "Merry Christmas to you too. Thanks for making this season bright." Then I hit send. As I sank onto the couch with a mug of hot chocolate, I thought back to every echo of betrayal and shame I'd carried, and how, one decision at a time, I'd laid them down. The bowl on my shelf was still imperfect. The vases still bore fingerprints from my early tries. But those fingerprints weren't failures. They were proof that even when life spins you off balance, you can center the clay and shape something real. I sipped my drink and let the warmth spread from my chest to my fingertips. Outside, the snow continued to fall, each flake a quiet promise of new beginnings. And as the lights danced across the white streets, I knew that the hardest chapters, those written in tears and midnight flights, had given way to something stronger. A story of honesty, resilience, and unexpected hope. This was my ending, and my fresh, unscripted start all at once.